Hello and welcome to the April 15th ILEA Support Pod. We are very excited. Brandon Nørgaard is here to share a very fascinating topic, which he's been working on for 10 years. 10 years. That means he's going to know a lot about it. And I'm just going to turn it right over to Brandon. So please put your hands together and welcome Brandon. Woo!
All right, thank you, Bet. And yes, what I'm working on is what's called networks of regional meta hubs, and these are in-person gathering communities. Okay, so some of you guys may be familiar with the concept of a hub, so it's like a group that has an openness to it. People come in and they connect with each other. So there's a lot of integral hubs around. In fact, this is a hub, right? What we're doing right now. It's a certain kind of hub for ILEA, but then there's a lot of in-person hubs. What we're trying to do is try to connect people more face-to-face, in-person, direct communication, which we lost a lot of that in the pandemic. Okay, but then this idea of a meta hub is how there's multiple hubs in a overlapping geographic region that are based on different functional areas and that stand in relation to each other, complementarity, and that there's like people are able to float across these different hubs, and they provide different aspects of life that are missing, that have become missing in our modern, hyper modern society where everything is all, gosh, we're on our phones all the time. People are like this all the time, even at restaurants, where they're like sitting across from each other, and people have got their, we're on our devices too much, and we need this direct communication. I think ideally it would be a lot of in-person meetings with people connecting to each other for adult lifelong learning, civil society. We get a lot of that for children, for adolescents, stay in school. And then after that, it's like, what is it? What do we have? Especially, okay, you have back in the 1820s, there was a Frenchman who toured the United States, the young United States. It was I'm sorry, I'm forgetting his name right now. So help me out here. You guys know his name? Okay.
Oh, de Tocqueville.
Yes, thank you. Tocqueville toured the United States, and the Tocqueville. He said, "What is it that makes America work? Why does it work? It's because of civil society. People are doing things with each other. It's not just driven. Also, it wasn't just driven by the direct governmental support or governmental restrictions on meeting. People were having all these clubs and connections with each other, and that's kind of something that we've got away from with being on our devices so much and staying home so much, and we could just order food and order all kinds of stuff. We don't have to leave our home. So we want to connect to each other. We want to do that. So this meta hub idea, what I'm basically trying to do with some of my close connection, the collaborators that I have right now. We're doing it in Sacramento, and we have multiple groups that are based on different functional areas that are standing in relation to each other. One person that I'm doing a lot of work with is Marty Behrens, who couldn't make it here today. But maybe he could actually, I'm going to ask him if he'd like to do a future ILEA support pod. Some of you guys met Marty already. So he's a pretty cool guy, and some other people who I'm working on with this. So how many of you guys are familiar with Hansi Freinacht? Sorta, you guys, yeah? Or political metamodernism. So Hansi Freinacht is actually a pen name for primarily it's two people. They are both from Scandinavia, and they were really into integral, but they wanted to look at how this could be applied to politics, to economics, to civil society. And so they created this thing called political metamodernism, which a lot of people have pointed out that that's, well, you're just rebranding integral here and applying it to, society and culture and politics and economics, and for the most part, kind of simplifying it a bit. So, and somewhat controversially in integral circles, they have this slogan, "Death to turquoise," because they're basically saying, okay, so we want to look at the spiral dynamics levels, but anything above teal is pretty much speculative or not as important, especially to community development like this. We want to focus on this development to teal, but that some people within integral circles, they want to keep growing higher and higher and higher, and so we haven't even really done hardly any real tangible work in the community level to try to bring people up to teal. So that's kind of the point. And the way in which we're doing that, or at least my interpretation of their work as applied to the situation that we have in North America, the United States primarily. I'm not sure if anybody here is from Canada as well, but it applies probably about just as well. So what we're looking at is creating these groups, these in-person meetup groups that can be seen as hubs in a lot of cities within the United States. And primarily I'm looking, okay, within a little closer to home here. I'm doing this in Sacramento, and I also wanted to try to start something like this up and help do something like this in maybe the East Bay. So what these amount to is, okay, so you have some groups that are primarily looking at sense making and trying to help people sort out fact from fiction in the news cycle and the media and look at things dispassionately, so we can talk about these issues that people are all up in arms about, and just there's so much fear and disinformation and people just not getting along with each other across different backgrounds in life. So just to bring people together there and to have those hubs based on that, and then another hub that would be based on inner development. So rather than looking at things so intellectually, we're going to get into we're going to be doing more embodied, awareness-based meditation, mindfulness, and authentic relating. So the idea, like, just that one of the main guiding principles here is that there isn't one single person or organization that controls those groups. They're hubs in their own right. So another organization, another group would be based on bringing people in civic engagement. Like, we want to get involved with the actual political system to try to bring about change. And there would be another group that would be helping people find a way to actually make their lives better. A lot of people have these these projects. There might be I'm starting a business, or I'm working on this sort of like regenerative farm or things like that. So that's we have something like that in Sacramento. Actually, it's called the GSD group, Getting Shit Done, or there's a PG version of the name, which is Getting Stuff Done. And then there's another connection so within this is based on what's called this Montesquieu 2.0 model, which is in the Hansi Freinack books. It wouldn't have to be quite so elaborate as the one that we're recommending, but they have essentially 6 different kinds of groups. And I'm thinking one of them would be based on like kind of a church, So there's, how many of you guys are familiar with like there's the Unity Church, the Unitarian Church, which are like kind of bringing different kinds of spiritual and religious traditions together. And so I personally have been involved with the Unity Church, so to look at that spiritual side of things. And then there's so that's another hub, essentially. And I'm sorry, just to make sure I'm rounding this out properly to cover all 6. It wouldn't have to start with 6, but like, just, you would figure you'd probably need at least 3 of these hubs together to make a meta hub. So just to make sure. Oh, okay. Okay, the one I'm forgetting, because I've mentioned 5 of them. The 6th one would be based on people just getting together and having a good time together, like arts and culture events, that's the 6th one there. So if you have, the idea being is if you have these 6 hubs that form a meta hub within a certain city, then you're connecting the bases and you're giving people meaning and purpose in life, and they're connected not only to things that help them economically at the personal level, but also get involved with the civic engagement. And then because there's the inner development and the sense making connected to the spirituality, without any single organization doing all of that, but these different organizations that specialize in these areas that are connected to each other. It's a meta hub. So now that's the theory, but also I want to say that one thing that can really help start this up is having an integral hub to begin with that would help sort of be like an incubator for these. So, and then ideally you would imagine the integral hub would kind of do hands off after they start getting running, because I understand that this is something Marty was telling me about, because he was involved with the Integral Institute 20 years ago or so, where they tried to do something like this, but they thought that the Integral group would more directly be connected to all of these things. So that's where Hansi Freinet comes along and say, okay, what didn't go quite right with all that, and trying to reimagine, here's what might work a little better, is to have like a separation of concerns across these hubs. What I wanted to do is I wanted to say, for one thing, is anybody interested in doing something like this in your community? If so, I might be able to help you and work with you on some of that. That's what I wanted to talk about.
So Brandon, first of all, I submitted an essay contest, as you know, to Suzanne's essay contest, which was called Communities of Action, which is, that's why we ended up chatting the other day. It's so sort of similar in a similar vein. But anyways, I just want to make that connection. And then one tradition that we have here is we ask you to say, or ask you to tell us, how can we support you? That's a question that you need to say or answer. Kim has got her hand up.
The way that you can support me.
Yes, so
you can do something like this, and that would support me by us working together, where you're doing something on the ground in your community, and then that would support me because my organization is the Enlightened Worldview Project, and this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to show this can actually work in more cities.
Okay, Kim, you want to add something to that or clarify?
Well, so Brandon, that's a really wide answer. So one way that Vic said it is, what does support for Brandon in this project look like? So what does it look like? What small action could one of us, what response, what reflection, what conversation, so a tangible small thing, what would each of our support look like?
Okay. What I want to say is, one possibility is that you're already aware of something like this happening in your community, and that we can have that sort of connection. We can start building that connection. And we're trying to like map out what these hubs are, and trying to figure out who wants to kind of shepherd this meta hub. So if you have that information about what's going on, probably a lot of these pieces of the puzzle are already kind of there,
All right, that's awesome. All right, let's see. Dan has his hand up, and let's see what he wants to add to this.
Yeah, that kind of partially answered my question. Ever since we were forming ILEA as a concept and doing the initial conferences back in the early 2000s, I think we were all reaching for this kind of approach. Since then, I've had a lot of life changes and got away from ILEA, but I keep coming back to see, is there something here, this concept of integral leaders in action, which was where the acronym came from. And since then, I've been looking at groups in the environmental world, because that's the space that I live and work in terms of regenerative economy and all of that stuff. And I've been, for the last, 3 or 4 years, been forming and working with others to form healthy soil hubs that are focused, throughout California. And there's professionals in that, but there's also, gardeners and farmers and all of that who are trying to create a regenerative environment and economy, which comes out of, the environmental and sustainability world. But I was also reaching for more integral approaches to that, and have found 6 or 7 other types that do that. And I think coaching between the groups who are doing their own hubs, what I found is that none of us can know everything, obviously, and none of us can relate to all, 7 billion people around the planet. So the hubs just seems like an emerging phenomenon in my life and obviously in your life. So I'm wondering how we can take hubs that are focused in certain areas like ours around healthy soil and water, basically food, water, and energy around bioresources, which is everything that's living. And every community now has to manage that in California by law, except they don't use the term bioresources. It's called landfill diversion, where organics don't go into landfills and rot, but you bring back that carbon and nitrogen and so forth. So I look at everything in a resource perspective, but that's just a narrow area. There's certainly an economic perspective that's part of my work. I'm writing a big grant under the US EPA for disadvantaged communities. And all the disadvantaged communities lie from, through the Central Valley, mostly. There's pockets around, and then definitely in LA where I grew up, which is all about water and landscape and food, food, water, and energy, which is the basic of life. So those are the hubs that we're working on, because soil and water are fundamental to producing, food. But food is a very small part of our total economy. Just in California, just as an example, our ag industry is 50 billion, and the state has an economy that's 3 trillion. So the whole ag industry, the biggest of any state, is only 1/60th of our economy. So it's really a low part of the economy. And a lot of the disadvantaged communities live there in these, chemically polluted environments. So those are the hubs that I'm working on. But I would love to interface with the other hubs and the other 6 groups that I've already researched. One is pro-social, another one is called Collective Impact Forum, which the Strategic Growth Council in California is working on. So there's a lot of, I think the concept is valid, basically, but the implementation is something we're exploring.
Brandon, do you want to say anything before we go to Karen in response?
Well, yeah. So I think it's cool to look at, what's happening in these geographic areas, like, as you're saying in Sonoma County, or maybe you do work elsewhere too.
I
And
work
looking at-
statewide because I'm
Yeah.
overseeing all of the composters throughout the state, mostly industrial composters, but we're trying to, there was a new association, mostly funded by Cal Recycle, that is the Community Alliance with Community Composters. And then there's a farming association, the California Alliance with Family Farmers. And then we have corporate farming, and we have corporate, energy and fertilizers and all of that. We're trying to bring those together to benefit genuine wealth in disadvantaged communities. Genuine wealth is a concept that came through Canada, but it's an outgrowth of the whole sustainability movement of people, planet, profit. And it talks about wealth optimization versus financial maximization or financialization of all of the aspects of the economy. So it's very economic, but also technical. So, and I see it vertical as well as horizontal. So that integral, because most people don't even get to orange meme, if we still use those colors, as opposed, like you were saying, teal or beyond. Forget about beyond until we can stabilize, metamodernism, as you were saying. I've read Hansi Freinet too, so that was, so your touch in there was important for me.
I need to read this guy. All right. There are so many hands. I am just shocked about how many hands are up. Are we ready to go to Karen or Brandon? Do you want to add anything else? Okay, Karen, now please share.
Yeah, thanks. Dan, I am so delighted to hear that you and people like you are doing what you're doing. That is not at all my area, but I've always been fascinated by compost as a reality and as a metaphor for so many things. I mean, yeah. I'm in a very different arena. My two main involvements, Brandon, would be the spiritual religious and the cultural and partying. For the spiritual religious, I'm a member of my local Unitarian Universalist Church, UUCB Church of Berkeley. I grew up Unitarian and left and came back when Trump got elected. But I am actually right now conspiring with some other UUs who are in the integral circles to get a Ken Wilber reading group going among UUs, Unitarian Universalists. We're going to have an alpha test during the summer. I'm going to be connecting with a couple of them at the conference in Denver. And then I've got it all. I mean, I've got this whole scheme, and I've got it set up to do a formal presentation at my church in Berkeley, probably in October, called Personal Theology Forum. And we've got a hotshot new minister who's very ambitious. He's a star and he knows it, and he's young. And the gal who runs our church's computer stuff, she's the brains and central nervous system of the church. She is ambitious, and they've both got their eyes on me to take, they want to have a bigger presence for UUCB online, which means things online that can gather more people. So I've got some contacts, also a UU integralist in Seattle and maybe one in Atlanta. And we're going to see if we can't bring UUs, Unitarian Universalists, kind of into the larger integral network, like has recently happened with the Unity Church. And I am also in touch with the gal in the Unity Church who helped align Unity with Wilber. And so I've already got my tentacles in that, and I would love to have the support of this group and make this part of what the nodes that you're talking about. So I'm in. We can be force multipliers for each other. And the other arena in the San Francisco Bay Area, I live in Berkeley, by the way. This is the East Bay. We have been trying for at least 6 months now to get Bay Area Integral revived. It went completely dormant with the pandemic, and then when Terry Patton passed on, it's dead. It was always focused around Terry Patton, even before. And I was kind of hoping to take it more general anyway. But just for the information of those of you who've been following with it, it looks like that was a non-starter. We tried, we did everything we could. And as far as I know, nothing has gone out to either of the Bay Area mailing lists. If they have, I haven't heard about it. So I think what we're probably going to be doing, Brandon and Kim, and that we're probably going to need to do our plan B, which is to restart Bay Area Integral from the ground up. And this is bottom up. This is complexity theory. This is why the US is so resilient. As de Tocqueville said, we have very active civic engagements. This is bottom up organizing in synchronous, in harmony with top down. There's a Goldilocks zone where you have both. And so we're going to have to do it bottom up for integral in the Bay Area. And at this point, Brandon, it sounds like the kind of nodes that you're talking about are precisely, if we can coordinate there, this could be with the help of integral leadership and action. This could help us, just those of us who want to do this, just reach out to our mailing list of people we know who are interested in integral in the Bay Area and rebuild it from the ground up. And it can be one of these nodes. So I'm in on those two fronts.
Excellent, thank you. And as you were saying, that you specialize in the spiritual side of things and the art and culture side of things.
Art and culture and the partying, yes.
Yeah, and the theory that we're drawing from here recognizes that there are going to be people who are really specialized in certain areas, and then there's other people who are specialized in other areas, so I wanted to help start up some kind of a sense making political discussion group in the Bay Area somehow. I think there's already something there. It's just that it doesn't really do much. So I mean, I started that in Sacramento like 10 years ago, and then that grew from there. Another art and culture group started, and a GSD group started, and gosh, what else? An interdevelopment goals group. So and so the idea is that these could all flourish, and then there would be some sort of an integral group that would help to make sure that kind of light touch, try to say, okay, well, let's keep these going, somehow, without being like dictator about it. That's not the way the integral group would be, but you pretty much do need that center of the meta hub there.
Yes.
To hold it together. That's kind of what we're looking at here.
There does need to be some top down to give enough structure. I think my current metaphor is like a trellis, but it's a temporary trellis to help get the real activity off the ground. And then when it's mature enough, it can support itself, and you don't need the top down trellis anymore. But there's a Goldilocks zone in between the bottom up and the top down. And that's what I'm always looking for. Oh, by the way, I don't know where the death to turquoise came from. I love it because I'm into turquoise. I think turquoise, if you're going to, and we really don't need these stages except as to me, this concept of stages is like the trellis. It helps us understand what we're doing enough to get off the ground. But to me, turquoise is where the tribes gather, if we're going to be second tier. Okay. The teal is understanding the concepts. Wow. There are always larger contexts. We can see all these different perspectives. We can see all these different activities. But to me, turquoise is where we start identifying our tribes and gathering in tribes. So as I see the world anyway, what we're doing now is very turquoise. I just wanted to throw that in for fun.
I want to agree with that, except that the thinking as given in I think it's the first Hansi Freinack book, The Listening Society, what it says is that that there's this sometimes within the integral circles, people really want to look at, like, I want to keep developing myself without looking at like kind of the descending path, and also that there's multiple ways of seeing what these stages are. In some cases, you can see it as a cultural code. So we're trying to develop a teal cultural code that can be understandable to people at the community level. So until we've even got there, you can't try to even build anything beyond that,
I agree. Cultural stabilization. By the way, I grew up in the Unitarian Church too, Karen.
Did you?
Yeah.
Where do you live? Where do you live again, Dan?
In Santa Rosa.
Santa Rosa. Okay.
Yeah.
I grew up Orthodox Presbyterian. My dad is a pastor, and he would probably say the Unitarians were heretics. But anyways, thankfully I've escaped from that. Yeah. All right. So there was a little flip-flop, Kim and Suzanne, and I'm not sure what happened.
It was dictatorial Zoom that just made a decision, but I've already spoken first. I do have some questions for Brandon, but let's let Suzanne just go ahead.
All right, Suzanne, you're up.
So Brandon, do you know who Stephen G. Post is?
I haven't heard that name. Sorry, no.
You might familiarize yourself. He's pretty well known. He's not no stranger. Funded over 50 scientific studies at the nation's top universities, as well as conducting his own research. When I heard him speak some, I don't know, 3 years ago or so, he had some influence over a whole string of hospitals, a system. And so the question was put to him, it worked well. And the question was, what is responsible for the system working so well? And he said, the main thing that's responsible is this thing that we do. It's called circles of 8. And everybody's in a circle of 8 people. I don't know if he called it circles of trust or if I named it that, because after that, I thought that is a really good thing. If everybody in the world, was in 8 people who cared about each other, paid attention to each other, helped each other, wow, would that be progress? But he would have a lot of familiarity with elements of that or how it works or whatever that you might want to pick up on. But then I also wanted to just make some comment about, it's not looking in our phones that got us separated. We got separated before that. I was thinking, what's the story here? Wait a minute. That's just new. What preceded that? And I'm thinking, oh, well, in the grand scheme of things, what preceded that was affluence. The richer we got, the less we did community. We can be in our huge houses, and and in a progression of richer, less community. And then I was thinking about LA, where I am, and I do projects, and I've done a fair number of them. And before the 80s, we were robust in LA with creative community in the new age. There were many projects. I remember EST was functioning at the time, and their big project in LA was a 24-hour telethon to raise money to stop hunger. And there were just huge participation. Everybody was engaged. And then I said, well, you know what happened to that? It disappeared, and it disappeared over something very specific. So I was running a big project at the time, and I was actually co-sponsored by the person running the EST project. They were co-sponsoring my project, blah, 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 blah. And we had meetings all the time. We had committees. Everybody was excited. And mine was a networking project, so we'd all get to know each other, and we had day-long happenings. It was really a wonderful project. So then came a chain letter. I don't know if you all knew anything about Circle of Gold. Ram Dass was one of the originators of it, who he later profusely apologized for. It was the scheme that was going to fund all the New Age projects that couldn't get funding, and it was very naive. And it went from $100 to $1,000. Then it went to house meetings. Then it went to lines around the block at storefronts that was on the front page of the LA Times to collect money. That's when the government stepped in and shut it down. And during that period, everybody was going to house meetings. They were going to give their money and get their money. Rah, rah. It was all rah, 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 rah. Everybody very excited. And when it got shut down, everybody got pissed off. And half the people lost their money. Only a few people really made money. And friends were fighting over whose downline they were going to be in. It never came back. There was never any community after that at all. It was gone. So I'm just thinking, money, look at this. The commonality is money. It's like we got affluent, we separated. We went after money, we lost our community. I'm just thinking that, isn't that interesting? Just thinking some thoughts here I haven't thought before. So, okay, that's what I wanted to share.
Suzanne, thank you so much for bringing that in. And I love the history. I love the context. And by the way, in my little communities of action, I wrote a lot about transparency around money, because being in churches from my until I was 35, when I walked away from that, there's nothing more contentious than fights over money. And I mean, people get divorced over money all the time, right? So yeah, it's like transparency and integrity really are critical for all these kind of hubs and these interactions. So thank you so much. Brandon, do you want to add anything on?
I just want to say, then of course the pandemic, exacerbated the separation. It's a sequence, or it evolves, and the evolution has been into separation. Now we got to come back, and that's what you're doing, Brandon. You're bringing us back in your project, and Stephen Post and whatever, to come back to being human with one another.
And yes, and thank you very much for this focus on the economic side of things and the affluence, one major driving factor of this is that we're now in like kind of almost a winner take all economy. A lot of people are really struggling, you know? Not everybody's affluent, or a lot of people like pretend to be affluent because that's like what we worship in our society. But it's actually it's pretty tough for a lot of people, you know? So like
Well,
what we need to
oligarchs have taken over. Now it's almost
yeah.
kings and serfs again, you know? The oligarchs are running everything. This is that progression where it gets worse and worse and worse as money is God, you know? And here we are, oh my God, you know, we got to change something because we're just hit the wall. So
Yeah,
we need to rely. Oh, go ahead, Dan.
no, I was just going to say, I just recently read Marjorie Kelly's book, Wealth Supremacy, which takes this subject head on. And she's the founder of Democracy Collaborative, which has been around since 2000. But the issue, you know, I face this because I made it my life mission to create a circular economy. And then you run right into the financial, and so I've worked with a lot of business people who've made tons of money. And the main way you become an oligarch is to financialize everything. We started doing that in colonial, so there's a whole history to all of this. And right now we're at the, we're kind of at the wide point and trying to come back to the golden mean, I guess, what you were referring to, Karen. When I was involved in Integral in ILEA, I was very interested in producing personal wealth. And I realized I had an inner, I don't know if you'd call it, you know, whatever you'd call it. I just have not had a positive relationship with money because of the uber wealthy who are now controlling, you know, at least the Republican Party for sure, and then many other, you know, autocratic governments, you know. And so we're at a crisis point on the financial piece because of what the problem of wealth supremacy, according to Marjorie, and her she's an economist, and there's a whole group. If you look up Democracy Collaborative, you'll find the group that she's a part of. But I think it's an important piece for all the reasons we were kind of touching on.
Can everyone
You
put
know,
all these books and names of people into the chat? Because I'm trying to look up these names and I don't know. So Suzanne and Dan both.
Yeah.
Right.
okay, and this I'd like to just pop in a little bit because I could do a presentation for this group somewhere down the line. It's not just the economic system that's breaking down under the strain of top heavy, and you Dan, you just told some, and to Suzanne, some of the reasons why, but all across the board in every arena of human life, things are breaking down. We're in a transition point from one era to the next emergent world order. And I see it as a cultural historian, and I've got a spreadsheet about it all, and I could make that a presentation down the line.
Absolutely.
That very much fits into how I see the larger picture and what is the next emerging world order. I hope it's integral.
So Karen, if you could check with Bet and we'll just get you onto the calendar. And I want to go back though to Brandon and what support looked like, because for me, when Bet came up with these ideas of the support pod, integral leadership and action, and Dan knows he was way back there at the beginning, action. So we can theorize a lot, but what action do you want to take? Because what I heard here so far, excuse my synthesis mind, I have to do it. There's this problem of money. So you're an individual and you have a lot of energy, and money is a form of energy. So how much energy, how much money, how much weight do you want to carry? What is your, in the scaling of this, how much do you want to do? For instance, I have a woman in Gary, Indiana, that I know if she knew what you were doing, I could just give her your email and she would be on Zoom with you talking about this stuff, because she's doing a lot of this in Gary, Indiana. But how much do you want to carry? And also then, what does support look like? Do you need one of Suzanne's circle of 8? of people, outside of, are you in Sacramento or the Bay Area? Where are you?
Folsom, which is near Sacramento,
I know
but
where Folsom is. I went to Sac State.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So, so how far do you want your boundaries to be? Who do you want to be coordinating with? And there's this question, I agree, and I don't think we have an answer, but it feels to me like what you're wrestling with is systems. And so what systems do you want to focus on, and then be able to have a reflective circle of 8, some group that you can actually work with, hear back, and then refine this to the extent of the weight you want to carry, versus what's the meta theory of meta hubs and how that can trickle out from you. So I'm not giving you any information. I'm just hearing this in a synthesized way and trying to point out some topics I see, and they almost all have to do with systems.
Yeah, and you asked a few questions there. Indeed, I do need funding to be able to do this full time. So we're working on that. I've got other people who I'm working with who, there might be a connection there. That's actually interesting. I'm not sure if anybody wants to work on some of these tasks. You see, a few days ago, I actually published an article where I was saying, okay, for any given project, you probably need X, Y, and Z, tasks done in order to have the best chance of getting funding. And so that's, there's collaboration on that. There's, now for some of what I'm talking about here, I think that you would pretty much need someone to be working some people would be working full time on coordinating these meta hubs and trying to plant more seeds, connecting these different organizations that are already on the ground. Like there's already this kind of organization, in this city, and there's another kind of organization there. So to find those leaders, to connect those people, to help organize more events and get people more engaged, so that's one thing. And then from the people here, I guess, yeah, it'd be cool, to talk after this to see if anybody wants to collaborate on some of these tasks, including, putting together a business plan, putting together, what is the impact? There's how do you measure the impact in terms of people, planet, purpose, and profit? I'm not sure if you guys have heard of those 4 Ps, which those align with the 4 integral quadrants: people, planet, purpose, and profit. And then there's multiple forms of capital. You can actually subdivide that to find multiple forms of capital that align with different, there's like 10 forms of capital in a certain system that the dean of my grad school, Sean S. Bjorn Hargens, came up with, and that he aligns those with the quadrants as well in his meta integral framework. This is all mentioned, in fact, in my article, which I'm going to link in the chat so you guys can read it. Just a moment. But and so there's that. There's essentially like who wants to work on these tasks. But the other thing that I want to talk about is another level of kind of support, like in action, is to see what are you doing in your community and having this connection between us so we can try to form these hubs or grow them.
So the only other question I want to ask really fast, Tom's here, and I know that you're planning part of this icon extravaganza. So do you have and Karen's here with the partying at night. Is there a party night where you get to actually have an informal way of talking to people about this? I don't want an answer. I don't want an answer right now. I'm just—
No, that was the plan. That was the idea. That was the idea.
It seems like that's appropriate. Thanks.
And now it's at the moment of this presentation where I mentioned Toastmasters. So I am a prophet and messenger for Toastmasters. I've been in it for 17 years, and I'm a member of 2 clubs. This is my new religion. And so Toastmasters has many flaws, and I know all of them, but it also is very, very successful at starting what you're talking about is little clubs. And it does it over and over, and they have a club growth director whose job it is to start clubs. And there's a playbook. I've trained hundreds of people on how to start new clubs. You got to have 20 people to do anything because people get sick, their cat gets sick, they change jobs. People are always coming and going. And the problem with cults is that you can't leave a cult. We don't want cults. We want to have communities that allow freedom. Does everyone agree with that? Yes, we want to be able to leave anytime we want. So the freedom to leave, you need 20 people really. So anyways, there's a playbook for starting Toastmaster clubs. And I think you don't have to reinvent the wheel for these things, right? It's like we have best practices. And the thing is with Toastmasters is it's like it has a very specific thing, like you're trying to get better public speaking, but you have sort of these charters for these different kind of groups that are pretty clear. And now I'm going to be really selfish. What I want in East Bay is improv. I had an improv group that I really loved and I miss it. So I'm interested if I, get past this icon event and I'm still alive, I'm going to consider putting my mind to starting that. And would that be part of culture? Is that
Sure, we could
be,
make
yeah,
that
in this framework.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm interested. I really need to do things that are very selfish and self-interested because otherwise I'm not going to have energy to do it, right? It has to meet my own needs of like, what do I need in my life? And I miss humans and I want to do improv with other humans. So I'm just going to go on the record.
So we could make that the focal of a physical get together in the summer after we've had a chance to recover from the Future Human Conference. We'll put something together in the Bay Area that's the integral mailing list, whatever we can put together, and that'll be our first party.
Yeah, and maybe Tiffany will come across the bridge, and it's not that far. We can maybe meet in Berkeley, and maybe Dan will come down.
Well, my son and daughter-in-law live in El Sobrante, so I was just down there yesterday, helping remodel their kitchen. So
there we go.
Yeah, and with the various contacts we have from the Bay Area Integral, those we know personally, we will invite them and invite them to invite anybody integral they know and just start it bottom up.
Yeah, and improv is a great integral system of being present and listening and honoring each other and yes-anding. And it's just super energetic and super fun. And I've trained many people in improv for a long time, so I'm happy to lead that. All right, back to you, Brandon.
Awesome. Yeah, so I just wanted to say that like it would be kind of cool. One of my next steps is to say, what if like maybe once a month I came down to like the East Bay to help this be a part of this sort of thing and help kind of shepherd it forward. But the idea ultimately like down the line, if like essentially we had a proof of concept of it working in more than one city, then we could start to try to plant other meta hubs in other cities where it's even more needed, like in Florida and Texas, where the culture is really, really messed up, right? So that's kind of the idea.
Yeah.
We haven't heard from Tom yet.
I'm enjoying sitting back and listening.
I bet.
Did you have any thoughts
listening to other people put something together for a change.
Not having to be the boss.
Yay.
I read the paper you sent me, Brandon, and overall, I'm supportive of it. I had some doubts about some of it, but I do think it's a worthwhile endeavor. And some of you've heard the Integral Congress, if we ever evolve into that, wants to achieve some of that too. Because the things that unite us and getting away from these fiefdoms with moats around them, I wrote in a Facebook page, is really going to be important because that is the actualization of the values we're supposed to share. And it's amazing how quickly they dissipate when it comes to, economic interests. I think Suzanne mentioned, and other things, egoic interests. So I like these efforts, but really finding what's going to bring people together where there's a value benefit doing it is what counts. Because we love our intellectual masturbation, but does that hit the ground running or not?
In action.
Yeah.
All right,
we get to
so we only have 3 minutes left. Brandon, any final thoughts and takeaways and next steps from you?
I'm just going to put my contact info into the, just a second here.
All right, while you're doing that, I'm going to just make some announcements. So we do not have a meeting on this. ILEA support pod is not meeting next month because we will be flying to Denver to be in person to party and speak and meet and lead volunteers and all this fun stuff. And I really hope, so Suzanne, can you make it? I forgot to ask you. Can you make it?
No, I'm not going to do that.
Okay.
I looked at it all. It's very impressive people presenting. Really top of the line. But I want to create with people. I don't want to listen to them. And I know in between, that's when the creating happens.
Yes.
With people and what have you. But I just can't stand listening to all these experts. And I know all that.
All right. Well, Marianne Williamson is confirmed, right?
Yeah, that's
person.
Quite wonderful.
Nice.
In person.
In person. She's going to be there.
I want to say one more thing. That snotty thing I just said, I know all that. I mean that about people who are presenting their body of work, whatever. And I do kind of know it all. But people who are inspirational, like Marianne, I could listen to that all day long, So.
Well, you could rub shoulders with her and tell her about how to fix the world. All right.
And
Anyways.
Can I just put in that Tom, when he set up the conference, he deliberately left more time in between talks and at lunch breaks and dinner breaks, more time in between so that we can connect with each other. It's not just about listening to the presenters. And I want to encourage that and encourage more of it in future conferences.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I will not be there. I realized I did seriously consider it, but my wife in her business had a conference that she was going to, and I'm her resident Sherpa for the last 50 years. So it's a weaving, and she's into fiber arts and hand weaving.
Ooh.
So she's has a booth there selling,
Nice.
weaving fibers. So I help her carry all that around. That's why I call myself a Sherpa.
Yay.
It's a beautiful gift.
Mhm.
All right. So we will not see each other on Zoom next month, but some of us we shall see in person. And I will reach out to Karen. I will see her in the morning, actually, to put her on the schedule for the next month, which is June. If my math is not broken. All right.
Can you run over half a minute and let me just say something?
Yes, please.
I know Marianne for decades, and I keep encouraging her, although she doesn't respond to me about this. She responds about other things. But I keep saying, Marianne, create the beloved community. That's a way that we all can come together, not political, but bigger than that. And we have no way to become a we. We're all gadflies. And I could see she could really do that because it's Martin Luther King. It's not like my bright idea, Marianne, let her pick up on what Martin Luther King started and make it real. So I keep writing that. I can write it to her. I drop it in chats. I tell people to encourage her. So I want to just say that she's going to be at your conference, and you can say that I pushed you to talk to her. But I just think that would be so wonderful if she would do that. So.
Nice. All right. With that, have a wonderful evening. Thank you, Brennan.
Thank
Have
you,
a great night,
Thank you,
everyone.
Brennan, for keeping this together. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Bet.
Yes,
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
bet.
you. Bye.
Bye.